Hello, everyone. This is Peter Knight. I'd like to thank you all for joining this AJBCC JETRO webinar. Before making some brief opening remarks, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country and note that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and to pay my respect to elders both past, present and future. My name is Peter Knight. I'm the Managing Director of Real Assets Advisory and Finance. We're a boutique firm focusing on clean energy and smart infrastructure, project and asset financing, and we're a proud member of the AJBCC. It's a real pleasure for me to moderate the second of these AJBCC JETRO webinars to be supported by the Consulate of Japan and Real Assets. Our topic today is value from waste and Australia-Japan opportunities in the circular economy. It's a timely topic, as this is National Recycling Week in Australia. It is also an important topic, as circular economy initiatives have the potential to drive economic growth, particularly in regional Australia, where new recycling facilities are being developed to leverage cheap renewable energy. In March this year, PwC released a report that highlighted that Australia produces about 74 million tonnes of waste per year, and that 91% of the raw materials contained in this waste do not find their way back into the economy. There is an enormous opportunity then for Australia to capture some of this value and generate additional growth. Japan provides an interesting example of vertically integrated waste management. As a country with a relatively small usable land and large urban population, the need for efficient waste management has generated some interesting technologies and strategies. We are very lucky today to have some outstanding speakers. The Australian Federal Minister for the Environment, the Hon Sussan Ley, will be joining our panel. The Minister has been delayed, so she'll be joining the panel later this session. We also have speakers from the Victorian Government, as well as Japanese and Australian industry, to give you their perspective on policy and business opportunities available for Australian and Japanese firms in collaborating in growth in the circular economy. I would now like to hand over to our distinguished opening speaker, Mr. Peter Gray, the former Australian Ambassador to Japan, non-executive chairman of MLC Life Insurance, and as of October, the president of the AJBCC. Peter, if you would like to provide some remarks.
On off mute, bye. Okay, is that better? Okay. So thank you very much for those comments, and it's sort of interesting actually. The first sort of formal role as president and incoming president of the AJBCC is on value from waste. I was reflecting on it. I mean, it's a really important topic, but I suspect our forebears of 30, 40 years ago would be pretty amazed that we're actually having a seminar in the middle of the week, which has more than 200, I think Richard told me, 240 organisations, and have lined up to spend their afternoon on this particular topic. It says something about a number of things, the nature of the change of our economies, but also the nature of the changes into the Australia-Japan relationship. And it really is, I know most of you on the call are already committed, otherwise you wouldn't be on the call, but we need to get out there and make the point, and this is a bit of a plug from an AJBCC perspective, just how important that relationship is, and how important, frankly, the AJBCC is. To have any organisation, business organisation, which lasts for, we're coming up to our 60th anniversary, the numbers and the range of industries have increased, not decreased. And I think still we're probably the only major organisation which has a Japanese counterpart organisation, which actually gives enormous strength to the organisation. And while, of course, the traditional areas of resources, both agriculture and minerals and energy, are critical and remain critical in the relationship, the really extraordinary thing over the last 10 years or so has been how the relationship has developed, both in a strategic sense, defence cooperation, intelligence cooperation, and the like, but also at the economic level and the investment level, how it's actually been totally altered by the range of industries, the range of companies who are now either trading or investing between Australia and Japan. And just at a time when we sometimes used to wonder, had the Japan-Australia relationship begun to peak, we used to have conferences to try and work out how to generate more interest and maintain more interest. We don't need to do that in a sense now because it's just happening. So, I just want to make those as an opening comment. The relationship is incredibly important. It's going to get bigger and better, and in a sense, its time has come, or a new peak is about to arrive in our relationship, and so it's fantastic. And it's an honour for me to take over the role. I have taken on a very daunting role because Sir Rod Eddington was quite an extraordinary person, or is quite an extraordinary person. But I'll do whatever I can on that and have a great team of people around me on the executive committee. And of course, we've got Richard Andrews, who is a real asset, huge asset to the organisation. That's a bit of a digression, but and if Richard was in front of me now, he'd be sort of winding his hands and flailing around saying, "Get on with it, get on with it." So I'll try and get on with it. But in terms of the speakers themselves, firstly the organisers, AJBCC and JETRO, and it's great to see that partnership continues to work and work so well over so many years, or after so many years. And of course, we have the cooperation and involvement of the Consul-Generals, I think in this case, both in Sydney and Victoria, and of course, Peter Knight's real asset advisory business. And I have to say, Peter, I'm always impressed when someone leaves the comfort of the bureaucracy and sets up their own business, boutique business. Personally, I never had the courage to do it. So good luck to you in your endeavours on that particular front. In terms of the individuals, I won't speak to each of the individuals who we have speaking. It's an impressive lineup, and I assume they'll be introduced at the time their turn comes. When the minister comes, I'll repeat some of these comments, but it really is incredibly generous of Minister Ley to actually offer up time to come to this meeting and participate as a keynote speaker. One thing you learn in government over the years is there's nothing more busy than a senior minister. The pressures on their time are just enormous, and so it's fantastic to have her involved in this issue, and we should try and keep Minister Ley involved more generally in the relationship. We need as many senior ministers involved as we can. I'll just briefly talk about the others we have speaking today. Adam Kaneen, who Victorian Commissioner to Japan, known Adam for many years. He was, as I mentioned in the pre-official chat, Adam and I were up in Japan around the same time. Tim Rose, CEO of Southern Oil Refinery, Kirsten Sturzaker, in English, the English version I'm told, Group Head of Sustainability from Asahi Breweries, and Kato-san, Head of Project Origination from Sojitz, Australia, and they obviously provide a fantastic cross-section of staff, of people to speak. So we've got a very, very strong panel, and we've got, as I said at the time, the last count, Richard told me it was around 240 organisations had signed up for this. So I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Peter Knight, for your role as an originator and initiator of this particular exercise. It's an important exercise. I look forward myself to learning a great deal from this next hour or so of discussion. And I think at that point in time, I probably should stop speaking and hand it back to Peter, who I think is going to do the moderation for the task. So thank you very much, Peter.
Peter, thank you for your comments. We have as our first speaker, Ms. Kirsten Sturzaker, Group Head of Sustainability at Asahi Beverages, Oceania, who will speak to us about closing the loop on plastic packaging. Kirsten has led a lot of the initiatives by Asahi Beverages, who've been looking at PET bottle plastics, and we look forward to the insight she's able to give from a Japanese business perspective. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you very much. My name is Kirsten Sturzaker, and I'm the Group Head of Sustainability at Asahi Beverages. For those who are not aware of who Asahi Beverages is, we're a member of Asahi Group Holdings, one of Japan's leading beverage companies, and composes locally of Australia and New Zealand's most successful beverage businesses, including Asahi Lifestyle Beverages, formerly known as Schweppes Australia, Asahi New Zealand, and recently Carlton and United Breweries. These are some of the brands that you might see on the shelves that we produce and market here in Australia and also in New Zealand, from Schweppes, Pepsi Max with our partners, Red Bull, Coolidge Water, Cotties. We have quite a wide portfolio in the non-alcoholic space, as well as in the alcohol space. Some of the well-known brands that you might see include Victoria Bitter, Pure Blonde, Four Pines, and Peroni. So just to touch on some of our approaches towards sustainability at Asahi is we believe our beverages bring enjoyment and connection to everyday moments in life. We're committed to ensuring Australians and New Zealanders can celebrate these moments in a sustainable way that protects our planet. And as one of the leading beverage companies in Australia and New Zealand, we are using our significant scale to deliver positive change through our operations and also partnerships across the entire supply chain. So how we are bringing this sustainability approach to life, especially linked to the environment, is we have key pillars which identify the key material issues we have an impact on as a business, whether it be the goods and services we purchase, the suppliers we engage, the energy we buy, or the way we manage our waste. Today, for today's forum, I'll be focusing on our recent developments we've made in the sustainable packaging and circular economy space. As most of you would know, containers and packaging play an important part in the overall supply chain of our beverages. And we recognise that in addition to maintaining quality and other functional purposes such as design, that there is still innovation and change required to ensure our containers use sustainable and recyclable materials, and also closing the loop. That is why we've set targets to move towards more sustainable packaging, ranging from transitioning to 100% rPET, reducing our overall use of virgin plastics, ensuring that all of our packaging is 100% recyclable, compostable, or reusable, and then also working across the supply chain to develop partnerships to collect and repurpose more plastic for recycling by 2025. Now, there are some key facts that we do need to unpack when we speak about sustainable packaging. And there are also some challenges surrounding the material choices out there in market. So I thought I would cover some of this in this topic today. So rPET is far less CO2 intensive than cans and glass bottles. When we look across in comparison to aluminium and glass, if we were to swap away from plastic, we also would be impacting our CO2 emissions across the supply chain quite drastically when you're looking at adopting more carbon intensive materials such as aluminium and glass. Whilst Tetra Paks are also another option to reduce our plastic usage, they also are lined with a virgin plastic layer and also aluminium, which unfortunately forms a polymer that can't currently be removed with current technologies and reused into another packaging, beverage package again. And when we look also at the transport of rPET bottles, they have a much smaller CO2 footprint versus cans and bottles. When we look at transporting some of these preforms, which are then filled out to a bottle, they take up a lot less space in the transport and the freight. We also speak with consumers quite often around the topic of what they believe to be the most sustainable option, and quite a few are coming towards this concern. We want to see more recycled PET being utilised in products, and they're also looking at the last step in the recycling process, and they're really concerned and they value it more importantly than the material it's used on what happens to it at the end of the life. Essentially, all packaging materials that go to landfill have environmental challenges, and the answer really for us is how do we close the loop and avoid landfill? And this has been our current solution that we've come out to market recently with. So in order to help meet our sustainability commitment to transition our portfolio to recycled plastics, close the loop, and to enable us to utilise Australian-sourced recycled plastic resins in 2020, we signed a joint venture agreement with Pact Group Holdings Limited and Cleanaway Waste Management to jointly build a facility in Victoria to recycle PET locally and to be remade again into food-grade rPET resin. Now, this cross-value chain collaboration uniquely combines the expertise of each participant. As you can see on the screen, Cleanaway will provide the available feedstock through its collection and sorting network, whether it's coming through from CDS schemes or bin-side recycling and councils. Pact provides the technical and packaging expertise. And then at the end of the cycle, as it goes through packaging production, Asahi and Pact will buy the majority of the recycled pellets from the facility to then be used in a bottle again. And some of those products you might see it being used include Pepsi, Schweppes, Solo, or Coolridge Water. Now, the facility is scheduled to be completed by the end of this year and is designed to recycle the equivalent of around 1,600,000 PET bottles per year. This represents an increase in the annual volume of recycled, locally sourced PET from current levels of around 30,000 metric tonnes to over 50,000 metric tonnes, increasing local PET by approximately 2/3. The initiative is expected to reduce Australia's overall reliance on virgin plastic waste exports and also recycled plastic imports. And furthermore, we will have on-site solar panels installed, enabling us to utilise renewable electricity as well. Now, this project has received around $5 million in support from the New South Wales Environmental Trust, which supports projects that assist environmental issues as part of the New South Wales Government Waste Less, Recycle More initiative. And these are some of the latest progress shots of the site, and we expect to see output from the site in early 2022. And this venture will allow us to utilise Australian-sourced recycled plastic resins to assist in meeting our sustainability commitment to transition our portfolio to recycled plastics in the future. And thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Kirsten, thank you very much. Our next speaker is the Victorian Trade and Investment Commissioner for Japan and Korea, Adam Kaneen. Adam is going to take us through some of the initiatives the Victorian government has taken in promoting the circular economy. And Victoria is actually one of the leading states in Australia for developing the circular economy businesses. And so it'll be interesting to hear what steps they've taken to do that. Adam, if I could hand over to you.
Thank you, Peter. I hope you can see me. It wouldn't be a presentation from a state commissioner from Australia if I didn't first of all say that we are first and foremost a member of Team Australia. We very much believe in all the states being blue chip investments for anyone in Japan to consider. Today, I'm just going to talk to you about Victoria, but any state in Australia represents fantastic opportunities. I'd also just very quickly like to thank the Minister for her participation. Also acknowledge Consul-Generals Shimada and Kia. And welcome Peter Gray, who's going to be a fantastic new chair for the AJBCC. I've worked on a number of occasions with Peter. Recognise Richard Andrews, who is a great CEO for AJBCC, and of course Takahara-san for JETRO. Okay, I'm going to share my screen if I can. Let's go. There we go. Hopefully you've seen Invest Victoria in the front there. Very quickly, for those of you who are not very familiar with Victoria, Victoria is in the south of Australia. It's 3% of the land mass, 25% of Australia's GDP, 25% of Australia's population, and forecast to be in excess of Melbourne, in excess of 10 million people by 2051. It's about 4.7 now, roughly the same as Sydney. So some significant population growth and the challenges which come with that in a sustainable society and circular economy. Very quickly, it's the quickest growing city. We're building infrastructure as quickly as we can to deal with that. You probably know of Melbourne and Victoria as previously as the automotive manufacturing hub for Australia. Note the names of Toyota, GM and Ford. We've transitioned now to be the hub for new energy, biotech and medical, agri-food and bev centre, advanced manufacturing, and of course smart cities and the circular economy. And it's a great place to do business from for Asia Pacific. Our timeline, we're 2 hours behind Japan and 1 hour in summertime. So we also have a great resource in our population for workforce, multicultural and very highly skilled. We've world-class education systems. I think Tokyo and Melbourne University roughly rank the same, I think, in the world ratings, and all 8 of the Victorian universities rank in the top 200. We have established Invest Victoria to help you establish and go ahead and invest or trade in the areas I'm about to speak in. Okay, Victorian waste and waste recovery is a new area of endeavour for a growing area of endeavour for Victoria. I want to just introduce you. We produce about 15 million tonnes of the number that Peter was talking about before, the 70 million, and we recover around about 70% of that for recycling. But if you look at the graphs at the bottom there, you can see that the great opportunity of the unused diverted landfill is in the municipal and municipal stream of waste. So there's great opportunities here, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that. Our construction and demolition sector are quite plugged into recycling, but there's opportunities in the mixed and commercial industrial, and particularly in commercial solid waste recovery and reuse. We have to, I think, recognise that the Commonwealth Government has introduced some export bans coming into effect over the next 4 years relating to products which may and may not be exported. We have China's new policy relating to importing waste, and indeed the spreading of that same sort of policy in South Asian markets. And that has accelerated the urgency around new policies and new support for assistance in developing circular economy. Indeed, it actually has created the opportunities. So already in motion, there's quite a deal of programs rolling in Victoria. It's understood that we need to support the programs. We have a transformative waste to resource recovery program focusing on driving investment in that recovery sector. We have new incentives, as you can see there, in the range of policies we're working out. And our priority areas are in organics, plastics, paper, cardboard, and hazardous wastes. And there are some of the key funding opportunities you can see there that can be applied for through Sustainable Victoria. Some of the policies which are being used to drive behaviour and industry opportunity towards more recovery and more reuse are shown here, and that's the introduction of a new 4-bin system. Many of the councils in Victoria have been using a 2-bin or a 3-bin system, but the new the 4-bin system includes food and garden organic collection, as well as the other 3 standard collection for glass and others. And as a secondary measure, Victoria is significantly increasing its landfill levy over the next 2 years to double the cost of using a landfill to around about $125 per tonne in Metro Melbourne. And it's believed that as we transfer to 2030, that this will reduce the landfill usage by around about 80%. So that 80% that is now being put in the landfills will now be subject for opportunities for recycling. The key materials that we're looking for opportunities in plastics, there's a 200,000 tonne per year shortfall, and that'll increase until 2025. We're talking about food grade PET and HDPE containers. We're talking about reprocessing of all sorts of plastics in codes 3 to 7 in the lower value groups, recovering plastics saturated by polymers, and indeed they're currently, all of those, around about 63% of them exported. So there's an opportunity to establish recovery and reuse operations for that. In paper and cardboard, about 300,000 tonnes per year capacity will be required by 2025. It's a large-scale investment, and there are large players in this area, but there's opportunity for new technology and for partnerships with companies like Visy, who are already creating large capacity reprocessing plants. And in organics, there's about 100,000 year per tonne capacity required by 2025. We're talking about opportunities in anaerobic digestion. We've got opportunities for water purification through the Yarra Valley Water, composting opportunities, and new opportunities in waste avoidance technology as well. Continuing to be specific, there's a large opportunity in tyres. We have a low capacity to recycle tyres in Victoria, and there's one of the large opportunities. Hazardous wastes and indeed textiles and glass, there still remain large opportunities, and we're happy to talk to you about those specifics. To give you an idea of the breadth of opportunity, here are just 3 examples that have already been funded to date under those programs, which were shown before, and we'll make the presentation available to everyone, that Manzara's fisheries are using their waste to create new proteins around omega-3 and nutritional oils from waste that was traditionally discarded as not fit for human consumption. Secondary, we've got Fresh Select, which is Victoria's first regional food cycling hub, and it's looking into the way that ingredients can be reused so that crop utilisation can increase from waste from farm and from pack houses as well. And I'm delighted to advise that RMIT is also putting together a physical recycling hub as an accelerator for new technology around recycling. So in summary, we have a new sector opportunity. We've got a number of policies driving industry towards the opportunity and underpinning that with a raft of funding support programs from the government. 2025 over the next 3 years is going to be crucial in gaining your spot. The Invest Victoria will help you locate in Victoria, but Sustainability Victoria is also there advising and assisting to plug in directly into opportunity areas and partners, possible partners in those areas. That's a bit of a whirlwind from Victoria. I'm here in Tokyo to help, but also I can plug you straight into our colleagues in Victoria to take advantage of those. Thank you.
Adam, thanks very much for that. And actually, we have got a couple of questions around the programs that Victorian government has to assist. So once we get to the Q&A session, we'll dive into those. But next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Tatsu Kato. He's head of project origination for Sojitsu. He's going to talk about Australia-Japan business collaborations in the waste sector. Sojitsu, one of Japan's leading trading companies, and they've recently expanded their focus on recycling opportunities in Australia. Tats, if I can hand over to you to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tatsu Kato. I'm a head of the project origination at Sojitsu, and also the one of the AJBCC future leader. And I'm based in Sydney and in charge of all the ESG and circular economy business development and investment all across Australia. And today, I'd like to talk about Australia and Japan business collaboration in the waste sector. So to begin with, I'd like to explain who we are. So we are the Sojitsu, the leading ESG investor and one of the largest Japanese trading house, and operating over 50 different countries for over 100 years. So in Australia, we've been here a pretty long time, and some people may recognize Sojitsu as more mining companies, but we are a little bit more than that. Now, of course, in the Brisbane and Sydney, we have very strong, core team, both investment trading, and also in Perth, we have alumina refinery and iron ore. But in addition to that, we have very strong renewable energy and healthcare and agriculture foods team based in Sydney, and also in a chemical business based in Melbourne. And this is, kind of traditional our business because, Australia is, natural resource rich country. And having said that, we have more traditional resource business, namely coal related and metal related business. And then for last 10 years, increasing the ESG demands. So we want to have more, circular economy business model and strategy by utilizing our existing asset and also like a strong relationship with Australia and Japanese and the global entity. We want to expand this business from this to kind of following these areas. So the good example include, because we have metal trading investment, so it's a natural move to go from here metal to metal recycling. And on the right hand side, as people mentioned beforehand, so after China soda policy and export ban, we believe that there's a very strong opportunity, especially plastic and tire and paper and glass. And also there is what we call food organic and garden organics, what we call FOGO, which I explain later. So before diving into the detail, so this is a very important target. So nationally, we have national strategy and target, so which apply not only the federal level, but also the state level. And then there are 7 targets. And of course, all of them is very, very important. But I personally believe that these 3 has good implication and show some opportunity in Australia. And first of all, and this is very obvious one, because we banned export to the West, including plastic, paper, glass, and tire to the overseas. So where this West goes, so we must process domestically. So obviously we need some facility to process these materials. This is one. And second, we have very important target to halve amount of organic waste sent to landfill by 2030, because now we have natural growth of population and more activity and more, organic waste or FOGO waste. And then in the past, it's so cheap and easy to do the landfill, but again, landfill levy increases. So we need some facility to process, Fogo waste as well. And thirdly, although we have national target for 80% average resource recovery rate, some states may have lower recovery rate at this point in time. And so we need to increase. And how we can increase this target? By having, of course, material recycling facility and also energy recovery facility. And this presentation or diagram explain, combination of what we call waste hierarchy and as well as, waste value chain. And then, as everybody understand, most preferred one method is avoiding waste and come down to, waste management and then reuse and recycling. So again, traditionally, like this value chain is much narrower, and because it was so cheap to landfill. However, just after China soda policy export ban, there is an opportunity for plastic and mining tire, for example, and glass and paper, and again, and food Fogo material, so organic. And metal, this is very interesting. We might have some e-waste. So because now everybody work from home, many PC, monitors, mobile device, at the end, we need to recycle. So there might be some e-waste opportunity as well. So this recycle is, of course, more preferred over energy recovery and the disposal. So even though we try our best to do the recycling, there is a residual waste. So we send residual waste to the landfill. There might be some alternative to landfill. This is the energy recovery. So at this point in time in Australia, we have 2 EFW projects in Western Australia. And then I believe that some major states, such as Victoria and New South Wales and Queensland, I think there need to be some couple of EFW projects to manage some residual waste. So these are kind of opportunity in Australia. And I go down to here. So now everybody understand, opportunities in Australia and how, Sojitz as an entity get into the Australian market. I think that the key is the technology, but more specifically speaking, like a facility that employ a new technology to solve the current problem Australian society face. So these new technologies are what we call enabler for these the projects. So which may include gasification, anaerobic digestions, we gradually expand our business to one state to other major states. And as we are like a Japanese conglomerate trading house, we have many business overseas. We may expand this business model to copy to other countries. So Australia-Japanese business collaboration does not limit it to Australia and Japan, which might expand to other countries in that more phase 2 and phase 3. So these two are more for like a company level strategic investment, but also like we see some opportunity for project based for EFW. So that is more sizable investment. So as I said, now we have 2 commercial projects in Western Australia, and I believe that there are several projects coming in Victoria and New South Wales and Queensland. And of course, Japan is something very, very good at EFW, and I believe that many listeners today would like to know this opportunity in Australia. So go down. So in summary, so there are clear opportunity for organic processing, including composting and anaerobic digestion, and also the material recycling, which including material recovery facilities, and then energy from waste. And due to limitation of time, I couldn't touch for others, but interesting opportunity may include EWaste. And the second one is economy-wide timely waste data platform. And this is relevant to the target 7. So because Australia is a very, very big country, so it is very hard to trace flow and stock of the waste. So if there is any technology provider who can provide this kind of platform, we can make data into valuable information. And thirdly, this is another like a topical things. And then if we can like do the activity that process, for example, organic, which would have gone to the landfill. So maybe we can create what we call ACCUs, Australian Carbon Credit Unit. So this is additional revenue for sponsor or business developer like us. So this is something that looking for Australian opportunities should consider. And finally, so waste to hydrogen. So this is, I would say, a little bit medium to long term. So especially after 2030, where hydrogen demand increases in Japan and the rest of the Asia, so there is like a clear opportunities for the hydrogen. So if we can divert waste to hydrogen, I would say medium to long term there might be some hydrogen opportunity. So this is a sum up, and just the following slide is some reference. I'm not just a blah blah blah. So this actually do some investment. For example, we have the PET chemical recycling. So this is a good like example of a technology investment. And the next one is that, so this is like we have strategic collaboration with Test Japan, and this like a disposal and the use and recycling of the e-waste, and what we call the ITAT, IT asset depositions. So again, e-waste is not like something we haven't talked, but I believe that there is increasing opportunities. And then depending on the scheme, there might be some subsidy available in Australia and could be in Japan too. And third one is like a little bit different approach, but relevant to the target 7. So we also have strategic collaboration with a company called Recotech, which kind of developing, demonstrating like a waste data platform. So this platform kind of visualize all the flow and the stock of the recyclable waste in a particular area. So if we can like employ some of this new technology to like a smart city or like a precinct, we can have a good case study and how to efficiently like trace these like recyclable waste. So user can like see where recyclable waste lies in there. So these are the like some of the example of Sojitz investment. And finally, so it's not today's topic, but we are the like a ESG investor. So this 2021 alone, we have already made 2 significant investments. One is a 204 megawatt Eden solar park together with ENEOS. And then also second one is a new Footscray Hospital PPP together with Plenary in Victoria. So having all said that, Sojitz is very, very serious about strategic investment and new opportunities. So if you have any further question, please feel free to contact me. Thank you for listening.
Tats, thank you very much for that overview of Sojitz's investment and the strategy that you're rolling out in Australia. I think there were some interesting points you included then about the ACCUs and the e-waste. I was actually on a project call earlier today where the company I was talking with noted that the price of ACCUs has actually, just has gone from $13, they were saying 18 months ago, to over $30 now, which shows their importance for these kind of projects. I'd now like to hand over to Mr. Tim Rose, who is the CEO of a Southern Oil Refinery, to talk about reflections and projections for the Australian future fuels market. Tim is a veteran of the circular economy business in Australia, having spent a couple of decades working in recycling and developing renewable fuels projects. He's going to talk about his experience and some of the initiatives that Southern Oil is taking in the market. Tim, if I can hand over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Look, by way of introduction, Southern Oil. So if we can go to the next slide, that's our Gladstone waste lube plant on the right in that first thing. Look, Southern Oil is Australia's largest waste lube oil recycler. And when we talk lubes, think about transmission fluids, hydraulic fluids, engine oils, from trucks, cars, buses, ferries, trains, anything that moves and has a lubricating system, we're collecting from it. We collect we receive about 420,000 litres of waste lube oil a day, and that's aggregated and collected from everywhere. If you draw a line between, say, Darwin and Adelaide, everywhere east of that, that is our catchment area, and that goes into our 2 refineries, which are located in Gladstone in Queensland and Wagga Wagga in New South Wales, where I'm speaking to you from today. So that's an area larger than Western Europe. So it's, as Tats alluded to before, Australia's a big country, so that's quite a logistical challenge getting that material back to our refineries. We refine the oil back into lubricants, but along the way also we're producing fuels which end up being a contaminant in the lubricant that comes in. So for 20 years now, we've been producing base oils which get recycled back into the original lubricants, and it goes back into cars, trains, planes, and automobiles, and fuels as well. So if you look at our refinery and you compare it to a traditional fossil crude refinery, it's got about 80% of the same elements. So we're refiners, except there's some important differences. You're dealing with a waste product, and that has certain materials in it and chemical changes when it gets into an engine. So waste oil is classified as a hazardous waste in Australia and in most places around the world. So it is a little tricky thing to deal with. But we don't have some of the issues that some of the crude guys have around it being a natural product coming out of the earth, and it's already been refined once, so it's consistent, at least in that. So I think we come at this, the value adding for the fuels, from a different approach. We're refiners, really. And we're the only ones to have built a refinery in Australia in the last 10 years. So probably 20 years if you think about it that way. The plant we built in Gladstone was about $100 million build. We did that ourselves. That was in-house. So we did the EPC part of it. The build was by contractors, but we controlled every aspect of that. So we're a very engineering heavy company. We've got, I think, 50 engineers and scientists working with me in Southern Oil. So that's kind of us. Where we've sort of landed as a side opportunity was we moved into the biofuel or renewable diesel space about 5 years ago because we got approached by government basically looking for new sources of fuel that were Australian, given the refining capacity in Australia was diminishing at that time, and has since, I think there's only 2 left now. So that led us into the creation of Synbio. We already understood the refining part of things, so what we did was basically embark on a worldwide search. Plenty of technologies out there with people promising the world and putting rubbish in one end and beautifully formed fuel coming out the other. so we went around the world. We basically built 6 pilot plants on site at our Northern Oil refinery in Gladstone, and started putting waste products through it, and evaluating how they turned into fuels. We've spent about $50 million to date on that, and we have Australia's only advanced biofuels laboratory, which is at our plant in Gladstone. So we have successfully been able to take 6 waste streams and bitumen residues, softwood and hardwood plantation waste, macadamia shells, agricultural plastics, and which was pretty dirty, and passenger truck and mining tyres, and we've been able to successfully produce an ultra-low sulphur diesel from each of those products through the refining process. It does create crudes that are a little bit different depending on the product that comes in, so it presents quite a refining challenge, and but I guess we're used to dealing with waste and tricky crudes, which I think some of the big guys aren't. The diesel that we produced was indistinguishable. It's what we call a drop-in diesel. You don't need to do anything more to it. You don't need to blend it. You can put it straight into any combustion engine. So, but what it has is much better emissions savings underpinning those oil. We have a formal partnership with Scania, who are an OEM of truck engines, and we've been working with them for the last 3 years on getting some engine tests done on the fuel that we've so far created. So that was the pilot scale stuff. If we can move on to the next slide. The next step is Project Sirius, and basically we're at the point now, albeit we've been a little bit delayed because the plant is located in Queensland, and half my staff are in New South Wales, so there's been a little bit of restrictions, interstate restrictions, that we've had to deal with. But anyway, those challenges aside, so what Sirius is that it's a $120 million pre-commercial scale renewable fuels project. It's basically building on the pilot scale work that we've already successfully done, and it's to link together 2 value propositions into the one integrated value chain, from the waste source through to a refinement through to a renewable fuel. So the precursor to the investment and the construction of this, well, where we're going to go. So this is the initial facility will be a 60 million litre refinery and a 20 million litre per year renewable crude generator, which will be based in southeast Queensland. We already have the tyres lined up and the plastics, the feedstocks have been lined up, and it's just a matter of turning the sods and getting on with this. The refinery capacity we've built a little bit larger at the 60 million because refineries are expensive, and the economies of scale are such that it makes a bit of sense, and that allows us to build 2 more renewable crude generators around the countryside, and we've identified a number of locations for those. You can see it's very Queensland heavily focused here because we work with QUT to identify the various potential feedstocks. But it really does go from the East Coast and into Darwin and into the Northern Territory and South Australia, basically where we're already collecting our liquid waste from. As part of this, what we found with dealing with these types of crudes is to get it to an ultra low sulfur diesel or renewable diesel, you need to use a lot more hydrogen than you would with a fossil crude. So what we've been also doing in parallel with this is working with the CSIRO to generate hydrogen from, I think it's classified as turquoise hydrogen. It's not blue, it's not green, but it basically uses similar technology to steam methane reforming, but instead of using a fossil fuel, it's using off gases as part of that. We can go to the next slide, please. Where this is, so we expect this to take 2 to 3 years to build. We're expecting this to start in March of next year. The site is, everything is pretty much in place. We're just really waiting for the go ahead from the Queensland government and the COVID restrictions to be lifted. Where this is all leading is there is a third stage here, which is about 5 to 8 years away, which is to build a commercial scale 500 million megalitre a year renewable refinery. And that I've said here that we're producing diesel and kerosene and jet fuels. We've really concentrated more on the diesel and actually the lighter octane petrol market. The jet fuels is still something that can be done, but the market economics for that are a little bit tricky at this point in time. So it's not something that we've been actively developing, but we'll wait and see how the airlines start reacting in Australia as some of their pressure comes on to reduce their carbon footprint. If we go to the next slide. Look, I'm not going to dwell too much on the next 2 slides. Basically, this is some of the work that we've previously done. I've included in here for the sake of completeness for people to be able to review this later at their own leisure. Basically, the fuel market is quite enormous, and we're talking initially around about producing 0.2% of Australia's diesel consumption. Diesel is very much focused on a commercial activity. It's not used much for transportation. So it is something that will be with us for a long, long period of time. Go to the next slide too, please. This is about the waste feedstock, and other players, other speakers have talked about that as well. Where we're concentrating really is in tyres and waste plastics. Now, when we talk about waste plastics, we're kind of talking about the bottom feeding plastics, not the stuff that's clean and can be recycled easily back into plastic. And there's plenty of those materials sitting in Australia that are going to waste at this present time. Next slide. So look, if I can just summarise where we're at with Project Sirius. It delivers a drop in renewable diesel. It's addressing a security and scarcity risk for Queensland, which is the most diesel-dependent jurisdiction in Australia. We do have offtake requests from major oil refineries up the wazoo, which is an Australian term for it's all pre-sold pretty much. It helps solve a problem with excess waste in Australia, and it creates a circular economy. It's a new industry, thousands of direct and indirect jobs. The fuel and waste market opportunity is quite huge. The potential for this for significant greenhouse gas savings. So it's 34 to 90% greenhouse gas savings, depending on the type of rubber that we use. So typically car tyre, which is a little bit more synthetic, will be about a 34% lower carbon footprint for the fuel, the diesel they're producing. If you're using a natural rubber, which you'd find in mining tyres, which is a market we're targeting, because at the moment they're throwing them back into their mining pits, it's a 90% saving. We've already done this, so we know that it's going to work. There's a lot of money being put into it. The project has deep bipartisan government support at state and federal level, and we've secured $36 million in grant funding from the state and the Queensland and federal governments. As I said, we're expected to start in March 2022. We're just cleaning up the last of the book build at the moment. And we're pretty excited by the hydrogen stuff, which is the process that we're developing with the CSIRO. That's really producing a great hydrogen at a very low cost, which is, given that we need 3 times the volume, and if you're dealing with any organic waste, it can be up to 4 times the volume. We need to have that at a third the cost to a quarter of the cost to make our fuel cost competitive, because unfortunately, even though it's a great carbon reduced fuel, no one wants to pay any more for it. At least the majors don't at this point in time. Okay, thank you very much.
Tim, thank you. So appreciate you kind of running us through the renewable diesel. And as you say, I think I saw that diesel actually outsold gasoline as the main transport fuel for the first time ever last year. And as you mentioned, even with the electrification of transport, that's going to affect gasoline. It's not really going to impact diesel emissions all that much. So the idea of renewable diesel as part of the circular economy play is a really interesting one. We're just on 6 o'clock now, so we're going to move on to our Q&A session with the panel. We've got a couple of questions that have come in, and so let me take the first one of those, which is a question for Adam and the Victorian government. So the question is, would you be able to explain some more details on hazardous waste and how the Victorian government is handling that, and anything about the process of distillation of waste? If you'd be able to field that question first, Adam.
Sure. Well, on the first part, I think on the slide there was a reference to the Hazardous Waste Fund. Hazardous Waste Fund has actually is cyclical. There's a new release each couple of years. The current iteration at 11.5 million. From memory, 25 up to 25% of capital costs of implementation of your project, your company's costs with no cap is available to be claimed under the process. I think specifically they're targeting technologies which can reduce Cat B landfills and achieve diversion away from the Cat B landfills. They're looking at technologies around managing contaminated soils, and also they're looking to see R&D technology around the management of the whole process of hazardous waste funds. In terms of the science and distillation, I'd have to take some homework. I'm very happy to take introductions and introduce you to our experts in sustainability, Victoria, to carry on the conversation.
Thank you, Adam. I think let's just. I think the Minister's office is just joining now, but we might move on to just one more question before we hand over to the Minister's office, if that is okay. Just quickly, for
just join, but just
sorry, for the Japanese businesses, there was a question about in entering the Australian circular economy, what kind of challenges have you faced? And in your experience, is there anything that else that the government could be doing to encourage investment in circular economy. Kato-san, maybe if I could hand over to you to field that question first, and then maybe Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. But I think, maybe this is good for Kirsten to explain. So that's, Asahi Clean Energy Pact is a good strategy, because thinking about a system, always system has, input, feedstock, and the process, and output becomes, feedstock. So like, maybe we need to identify what kind of role, or let's say positioning, you can make to the particular field. So, this consortium is the good example of the each industry had a different role within the one consortium. So maybe in Soji's context, because we have renewable energy, not only not all the waste management company for familiar with, for example, electricity or PPA, EFW project, maybe some of the output would be, electricity or some other, other products. So we are investor and also the industry player. So maybe we can identify some of the output. So you need to think about strategically what kind of value you can add to the existing concept. So in short, we need to be clear, same interest, but a different role within consortium. So maybe Kirsten can explain a little bit more detail.
Thanks, Kato-san. Kirsten, over to you.
Yes, I think working with partners who bring expertise in their certain part of the supply chain is how you're really going to be able to drive cooperation across these types of projects, knowing that each partner contributes, but then also can take away something from these types of partnerships moving forward. So it's really, as Tats put just before me, it's really being able to leverage the key skills, knowledge, and experience of each of those partners across the supply chain to make it successful.
Thank you. For the Minister's Office, I can see we've got you muted at the moment. Are you able to unmute?
I can unmute, but I can't start my video because it says the host has stopped it.
Okay.
Hang on, now the host has asked me to start my video.
Okay.
But still,
Minister.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and apologies for keeping you waiting.
You haven't,
joining.
Peter, you haven't kept me waiting. I have been on the call for about 45 minutes and I have enjoyed every minute of it. It has been a pleasure to listen to all the speakers, and I think in future I'll choose to speak at the end rather than the beginning, so I hear these good conversations about waste. But again, thank you for hosting, and thank you for the invitation, and congratulations to you on the excellent work that you're doing. To the Australia-Japan Business Coordination Committee, to Takahara-san and everyone who is listening. This is a really important issue and one I'm delighted to speak to. Australia, of course, has a strong relationship with Japan, a country I personally have great affection for. We are significant trading partners. We work together on several international fronts to improve. For example, marine plastic waste, which is a significant risk to our ocean health and our economies. Addressing the plastics pollution that is everywhere requires partnerships between governments, industry, and community. We look forward to working closely with Japan to seek global action to combat plastic pollution at next year's UN Environment Assembly in Nairobi. In recent times, our countries have increased our attention on circular economy initiatives, which offer new opportunities for businesses. In Australia, as you all know, significant change is underway to transform our waste, our recycling and manufacturing sectors. Our decision in 2019 to stop sending our waste, glass, plastic, paper and tyres overseas not only meant that Australia took responsibility for its own waste, but that the Australian government is thinking about how to use our waste to create jobs, to drive innovation and to deliver strong environmental outcomes. And the solution lay in changing the very nature of our economy and moving it from a linear model where products are made, used and thrown away at the end of their useful lives to a circular economy. After the export bans were announced, the Morrison government determined that we needed to really ramp up our ability to recycle what we had previously thrown away and then use those recycled resources to keep their value within the Australian economy, genuine microeconomic reform. And at its heart, that's what the Australian government's $190 million Recycling Modernisation Fund is. It's the engine room of Australia's circular economy. It's backed by the Prime Minister, designating recycling as one of Australia's 6 national manufacturing priorities, along with space and defence. And it is achieving significant results. Through our partnerships with state and territory governments and industry, we've co-funded 78 projects across Australia, delivering new and improved recycling and remanufacturing facilities. The total value of investments to date is $600 million, with more exciting projects to come. And I'm delighted to say that 23 projects are in regional and remote areas of Australia. And many of them are in remanufacturing so that we make valuable new products from waste. Last week, I visited the Shoalhaven just south of Sydney, where we've partially co-funded a $1 million microfactory, which will remanufacture glass and mattresses into green ceramics. What excites me about this project is that it's a collaboration between the Smart Centre at UNSW and the Shoalhaven Council to deliver solutions that are localised and fit for purpose. And as Professor Vina reminded me on the day, all of the IP stays in Australia. On Monday this week, I visited Australian recycled plastic in Narrabri in the central west of New South Wales, where a forward-thinking farmer saw an opportunity to diversify into the circular economy of plastics. In 2019, Australia launched our National Waste Policy Action Plan, which sees waste as a resource and supports Australia's transition to a more circular economy. As part of the action plan, Australia committed to take more responsibility for our waste and cease export of waste overseas. In collaboration with industry, we developed targets to help transform waste previously destined for export or landfill into valuable products. It's good business sense to recognise our used items previously considered rubbish as a resource and to use them again as often as we can. Significant public and private investment has flowed into Australia to capitalise on circular economy opportunities. The Australian government is turbocharging over $1 billion in investment to boost our recycling and manufacturing industries. In 2015, we contributed over $3 million to Southern Oil Refinery's Advanced Biofuels Laboratory, which demonstrates the opportunities and benefits of turning waste into a valuable resource, and you've just heard that this afternoon. Together with the New South Wales State Government, we contributed $5 million to Asahi Beverages to build its $45 million recycling plant with Australian partners Cleanaway and the Pact Group, and I'm pleased to say that's in my hometown of Albury. Circular economy initiatives also support our partnership with Japan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions using technology, whilst also ensuring economic growth and job creation. Modelling from PwC indicates that by building a more circular economy, Australia could generate nearly $2 billion in direct economic benefits over 20 years, and more importantly, perhaps save 165 million tonnes of carbon dioxide per year by 2040. So it's good for our economy, it's good for our environment, and it's good for our society. And finally, may I say that while I've talked about what government is doing, we can't do it without the doers. We do the funding, we set the policy, but the stepping up of industry, of our partners in every corner of Australia, and their commitment, their excitement, and their understanding of the sector in which they live and breathe, everything, has really helped inform what we've done to date and the next important and exciting policy steps in recycling. Thank you again.
Minister, thank you very much for those comments. We've had a couple more questions. One is around, apart from the plastic side, you touched on organics and some of the other projects that are driving regional growth. Could you elaborate a little bit more in terms of some of the regional recycling opportunities that you'd see, particularly for Japanese companies that are interested in looking at that?
Well, some of the biggest FOGO projects, and you know that that's food organics, garden organics, are actually in regional and rural areas. Now, you would like to think that a completely anaerobic process has no smell, but sometimes it does. And even if it doesn't have much smell, our EPAs like to put rules and regulations, and there's obviously attention about putting these sorts of facilities close to housing developments. And there's not always the space in metropolitan areas, so it really does make sense to do it regionally. In addition, we announced at the last budget, and we're starting to roll out new funding for projects that in fact are all about FOGO, demonstrating that you can turn FOGO into healthy soils, and that the healthy soil aspect is of great relevance to our farmers who of course are out in regional Australia. So I think the opportunities are emerging, but I also think there's an exciting piece of work to demonstrate the food and organic waste into the healthy soils and the productivity for agriculture that actually happens more quickly than people think. Because you sort of tend to think, oh, well, if you're building carbon in the soil, which of course you are, it's a huge side benefit. If you're doing these other things, it'll probably take several cycles. But in fact, what farmers have told me is it happens really quickly. So there's a really exciting opportunity. What people see in the real world is what they adopt. And farmers, of course, are front of the pack with that. What they see, what they experience, perhaps in the neighbourhood, they will actually adopt. So we're really looking forward to that.
Thank you. Another question for a couple of our other speakers who've touched on waste to hydrogen. Clearly there's a lot of interest around the growth opportunities for Australia in hydrogen. A lot of that has been looking at new processes such as electrolysis using water, but using waste as a feedstock is another interesting way of developing that. Maybe Tats, if you could elaborate a little bit on the sort of things that Sojitz is looking at. And Tim, you'd also touched on recapturing hydrogen from some of the waste gases in recycling tires that you're looking at. And it'd be good to hear about the potential you see for that, not just in your own processes, but in supplying into the market. But Tats, over to you first.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, maybe everybody had a different approach. And then my understanding that in Australia, there are many, 50, 60 different hydrogen projects. So from like a Japanese investor and trading house perspective, I think in early stage, definitely we need support from both governments, also like from Australia and Japan to, make a project economically feasible. And then like we kind of looking for some of the, green, hydrogen ammonia project. And maybe we can add value for the project because we are also the IPP developer. So maybe we can add value for, solar project and a wind project. And then if, Japanese entity is involved, maybe we can further kind of seek some support from the Japanese government from the, subsidy and also the concessional loan. And then, after, especially, maybe everybody had a different assumption, but after, again, let's say 2030, when, again, electricity costs going down, and then like capex of electrolyzer goes down, and at the same time, demand for green hydrogen ammonia increases after 2030 in Japan and rest of Asia, and then there less premium on the green. So in that case, there are like more opportunity after the 2030, and then by then we want to have maybe smaller exposure to several projects in Australia to see how it goes in Australia. And also interesting is there might be some opportunity not only in Australia or Japan. There is some we can have some scheme too for Pacific Island as well. So maybe we can do smaller pilot project, and then creating green hydrogen and like a demonstrated project to other Pacific Island. This is something we are looking for. Maybe I pass over to the team.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Tats. I guess we've approached They say necessity is the mother of invention. That's why we had to get into hydrogen. We didn't go down the green hydrogen route because we need it cheap, and the technology isn't there yet. So that's why we've gone down the path that we have. We've got a lot of hydrocarbon material which is wastefully kind of burnt off, I guess, as a byproduct of the process, of the refining process, which is why we went down the path that we did with the CSIRO. But it's, from what we've seen, we've gone through the pilot scale with those guys. It's entirely scalable, and it gets it down into the cents per kilogram range that we need to achieve to be able to turn it into a fuel. Interestingly, I think the world will catch up, as Tats said before, and with the hydrogen infrastructure that's coming on stream, that'll have to come on stream to be able to handle all this sort of stuff. We're in a good space, I think, to be able to take advantage of that and have a project on the ground actually producing hydrogen, in the next couple of years, to take advantage of that rollout of that infrastructure.
Thanks, Tim. And then, Kirsten, a question I think applies mainly for you, well, particularly for yourself. With your experience with Asahi and rolling out the recycling capability, one of the questions that crops up a lot from Japanese companies looking at this sector is EPA approval processes, and particularly when new technology is looking to be brought into Australia. Could you give a little bit of your perspective on that? I mean, were getting approvals for the development of the facility a challenge to you? Is there any advice you'd have for people who are looking at those kind of projects?
I think there's quite a few different opportunities to work very closely with the EPA for these projects. Fortunately for myself, or unfortunately, I wasn't involved in the direct approval process with the local EPA. So I can't really comment that much, but I can swing back on that and come back with an answer for the wider webinar, if you like.
Thanks, appreciate that. And then, Adam, I'd be interested in getting a Victorian government perspective as well on some of the points that Minister Ley was making around regional growth development. Are you seeing similar opportunities in regional Victoria as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. And to follow up a little bit on what Tim said as well, the Minister mentioned actually about food and organics in your previous question. I just wanted to tag that and say that on that page that you saw the grants, the 17 million for the Circular Economy Business Innovation Centre and Fund, their priority is indeed organics, food, beverage and textiles in terms of recycling. So the question for that one should definitely speak to us a little bit about that for opportunity of support. In terms of regional, under the guidance of the federal government, a series of state-by-state hydrogen hubs is being rolled out. That's one of the incentives that is causing opportunity around both blue and green. And, you know, I think Australia would prefer to talk about the amount of emissions from hydrogen as we go forward. As Tim said, that we're a little ways off a commercial renewable hydrogen option at the moment, but there is a significant demand as we transition, and we will be taking hydrogen from carbons and sequestering and using the CO2 into the future. Victoria's a long way down the track on that and has several projects running, but at the same time, particularly in the regions where there is support and where there's already industrial infrastructure and indeed clean energy to power things like green hydrogen, we're seeing a significant uptick in interest and in opportunities. But also when you talk about waste to energy as well, as everyone probably realises, waste to energy, it's not really a project for your backyard. You need to have several municipal players involved to make it worthwhile at scale. And we're seeing that in Victoria as well. So we're seeing transitional technology around hydrogen from hydrocarbons. We're seeing renewable hydrogen, but generally in the regions where the generation opportunity also exists. So yeah, it's recharging the regional economies.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, well, that brings us to 6:25, which is the end of our panel discussion. I'd like to hand over now to our closing speaker, Mr. Takahara, who is the head of JETRO in Australia, to wrap up our webinar. JETRO, along with AJBCC, is the other co-sponsor for this webinar series. Takahara-san, if you could make the closing comments, please.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. As we conclude today's webinar, I'd like to say a few words as one of the co-organizers. First of all, I'd like to thank Honorable Sussan Ley, Minister for the Environment, for taking time out of her very busy schedule to join us today. We are very honored and very much encouraged to promote bilateral initiatives between Australia and Japan. I'd also like to thank AJBCC and all the panelists for their cooperation, and Mr. Peter Knight for moderating the session. Japan has been working on 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle since the early 2000s, and has made steady progress in reducing the amount of final disposal of waste and increasing the recycling rate. On the other hand, the economic and the social situation in Japan and abroad is changing drastically, especially with the global population growth and economic growth. There is a global need to shift from a mass production, mass consumption, and mass disposal economy to a recycling economy. It has become important for Japanese industries to shift to a highly recycling-oriented business model, seeing it as a new business opportunity that will lead to a virtuous cycle of environment and growth, rather than the conventional 3 R's as waste and environmental measures. In January of this year, the government and the business community agreed on the Japan Partnership for Circular Economy, called JForce, which will strongly promote Japan's advanced initiatives. I will send you the URL of the JForce's activities and examples of advanced activities of Japanese companies by email later. Lastly, when you exit the Zoom, a post-event survey will pop up. We would sincerely appreciate it if you cooperate to fill the form. We will use your feedback for future webinars. Your feedback is valuable. And at this end of the session, I'd like to take a group photo with all the panelists and everyone who helped. So I'd like to invite all the panelists to turn on your video to have a group photo. Will you cooperate with me?
Thank you, Takahara.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do we have everyone? Peterson, Richard. Oh no. Okay. So smile. Yep. Taken.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your time today. And you, Peterson, would you like to say something at really the very end? Okay. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So again, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, AJBCC and JETRO, for kindly hosting this event. The Consul-General for Japan has also played a major role in supporting these. And so we're looking forward to working with our sponsors to organize further webinars in the future. We've already had some feedback around topics such as smart infrastructure, and digital economy, and we look forward to hosting those sessions in the future, and hope that you will all be able to participate in that as well. Again, thank you for taking part today in today's webinar, and thank you. We look forward to the next event. Goodbye.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
お疲れ様でした。どうもありがとうございます。